I think my wife and kids are actors. I've been married to Marie, my wife, for 15 years now. We have two kids together, Aaron, 10, and Priscilla, 8. I have always pictured us as the perfect family, you know. Nice, spacious house in a good neighborhood, barely any arguments, well-behaved, healthy kids with good grades. Everything seemed spotless. But lately I've been noticing things that have made me question everything in my life. But let us start at the beginning. I have always been a workaholic. For the last 20 years, I have averaged 150 yearly commuter days. I spend more time in airports than I do with my own family. So it is only to be expected that things change when I suddenly find myself stuck in the house 24/7, right? That is exactly how I was trying to justify the weirdness. I've hardly spent a full weekend with them in years. It is going to take time to get used to me hanging around here constantly. I suffered a pretty serious neck injury on the job a few months back, which kept me hospitalized for a good 2 weeks. I am mostly fine now, but because of the nature of the fracture, I still have to wear a collar for stabilization, and there is at least a couple of months until I'm ready for work. So I spend my days just wandering around the house, not quite knowing what to do with myself. My wife is a stay-at-home mom. She is the love of my life. We met at a company retreat 17 years ago, and we hit it off immediately. Soon we fell in love, got married, spawned the kids, you know the deal. She left the company when Aaron was born. I was making enough for the both of us, so I was happy to see her happy. But now things are different. I have no idea if she's happy anymore. She always smiles, always laughs, but it feels so emotionless. Forced even, and she sneaks out when she thinks I'm napping. At first I thought she was having an affair or something, but I'm not so sure anymore. My kids are just weird around me. Aaron won't look me in the eyes, and Priscilla seems to avoid me at all cost. I shrugged it off the first few weeks. Maybe they just needed a little more time. But time didn't help. Time only made it worse. My wife keeps sending them to her parents every weekend. They love it there, she says. She allows them to sleep over at their friend's place too often as well, even on school nights. I've tried to set some boundaries, but my wife just ignores them. She knows them best, she says. Can't argue with that. I tried driving my kids to soccer practice and gymnastics twice a week, hoping to get some conversation started. They seemed really upset at the idea of me taking them anywhere, and my wife desperately tried to get me to reconsider, but I insisted. I stopped taking them after a week. The look in their eyes scared me. It was like the very presence of me made them so uncomfortable that it nearly induced panic attacks in them. I was at my wit's end at this point. Laying awake at night, my mind started drifting. I have always joked that I spend so much time away from them that they could easily be replaced and I would hardly notice. And then I remembered the Aaron incident. I sat up in bed, sweating. The Aaron incident. When Aaron was 2, a few months before Priscilla was born, I had been spending months at the time on a job. When I got home for a much-needed long weekend, my wife and son greeted me at the airport. Only it wasn't my son. I didn't recognize him at all. I stood there frozen for minutes before my wife, looking quite flustered, snapped me out of it. "Pick him up," she said. "He just wants to hug his father." I picked him up and just stared at him. He didn't seem familiar at all. At this point, I was starting to feel unwell, like I had to throw up or something. I couldn't understand why I didn't recognize him. When we got home, I told everything to my wife, and she said it was because I spent too much time away. Kids that age grow and change like crazy, she explained. It took me weeks to accept it, but at some point I just realized I was acting like a lunatic and got on with my life. The thought of the Aaron incident sparked something in me. I started thinking back to other strange, seemingly explainable things that had happened. Like that I wasn't present when my wife gave birth to any of the kids. That I was never around much the last trimester of her pregnancies. That I have never actually met any of her relatives, except for her parents, who've always been strange around me. I started feeling dizzy and nauseous just thinking about it. Was the last 17 years of my life a lie? It seemed so impossible, but at the same time I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The only thing I knew for certain was that I had to get to the bottom of this. Otherwise, I was afraid I was going to lose my mind. I started paying more attention to every little detail that went on in the house. Every conversation, every phone call, every movement, any little detail that could explain what was going on. There was always something that never quite made sense. Just a tiny little thing that would catch my eye. How they always seemed to talk in perfect order, like they were reading from a script. Like how they always seemed to know who was coming up the driveway just moments before they actually did. Like it all was some elaborate stage act. I was getting more paranoid by the minute, and I think they noticed something was wrong. That's when my wife sent me to therapy. She said I needed it, that I had been acting different ever since I got home. Like everything was my fault. I tried explaining to her that I was probably just a bit anxious because I wasn't used to living there, but she wouldn't hear it. My first session went as I had suspected. The therapist was desperately trying to get me to question myself and my motives. I didn't share anything with him. I simply couldn't trust him. Maybe he was in on it. Maybe they were trying to label me insane, lock me up in some godforsaken asylum. To what end? In any case, I couldn't afford to spill my suspicions just yet. I needed some proof. I told my wife everything went great and that I understood I might be coming on too hard. I was going to take it easy and not force them. I would leave them to it and learn as I went along. All that jazz. She smiled one of her obviously fake smiles and gave me a cold hug. She was so pleased, she told me. I was going to get better in no time. Sure, lady. I had come to realize I approached the matter from the wrong angle. I shouldn't have given away my suspicions so easily. Instead, I should have followed the one trail they could not hide: the money. If they were indeed actors, they had to get paid, right? And there had to be some evidence of some transaction somewhere. Even if they got paid in cash, I could perhaps follow them and catch them in the act. Yes, this was a plan. I spent days without sleep going through bank records, receipts, the GPS of the car, without getting anywhere. Everything seemed just fine. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was tearing my hair out in despair when fate suddenly intervened, and they slipped up. Just a tiny mistake, mind you. They could have easily gotten away with it if I wasn't already in a state of complete awareness. One morning, my wife was getting the kids ready for school. Everything normal. Eating breakfast, packing their lunches, ushering them into the car. The old, we're going to be late for school shtick. But it was just this one tiny detail. The school was closed that day. My wife did not know this, but I had looked through all the papers I could get my hands on, one of them being the school calendar. And that day they were definitely closed. I don't know if you have experienced such a feeling. It is like a mix of total relief and utter devastation all at once. To prove to myself that I wasn't insane, but at the same time realize my life was a lie. And the day wasn't about to get any less absurd. Not only did my wife not realize that the school was closed, she also forgot her purse, and in it I found the one thing I had been looking for the past few days: a paycheck. Now the paycheck wasn't made out in her name, or the name I knew her by at least. It was made out to one Lisa Guerin. But it wasn't that little detail that threw me off. It was something else. Something extremely disturbing. Something impossible. It was the name listed as the employer. It was me. I was the employer. After the initial shock had worn off, I sat down on the couch, clutching the paycheck. Maybe I was a little bit unhinged, I pondered. After all, there were still ways to explain all that had happened. The kids could have changed school. How would I know, right? The paycheck could be a payment for some company-related business that my wife had found and just forgot to mail. All explanations within the realm of believability. I yawned tiredly. Maybe I should just sleep on it. I was just about to close my eyes when the doorbell rang. I sighed deeply as I slouched towards the door. My energy levels were dangerously low, and my mind was wandering all over the place. I really couldn't carry a conversation in this state, so I was hoping it was only some kids pranking me or something. I opened the door hesitantly, only to be greeted by the creepiest smile I had ever seen. "Hi there," the cheery old mailman insisted. "I have a package for you." I stood there blinking for what must have been 10 seconds. I was just so fazed by that strange expression on his face. Even weirder still, he didn't seem to flinch, as I must have stood there staring like a total lunatic. He kept portraying that toothy grin like it was some sort of contest. I ventured eventually. You sure? He offered me a square box wrapped in brown paper. He pointed to the label on top of it. That your name? He asked. I read the label. Sure looked like my name. Yeah, but I haven't, I started, but the increasing intensity of his smile threw me off. I grabbed the package promptly and took a step back, signaling that the transaction was completed. He just stood there frozen, still smiling like a murderous devil doll. The lies have become the truth, have become the lies, yes? He said just as I was about to close the door. What was that? I asked super rhetorically. Oh, you'll come around. He laughed heartily. Do say hello to the missus for me, will you? Sure thing, buddy, I whispered under my breath, slamming the door shut in his creepy face. I immediately ran to the living room window, keenly watching the stranger's every move. He just stood by the door for a solid minute, before turning on a dime and pacing down the street with some haste. I shook my head in frustration. I felt like I had walked into a Twilight Zone episode or something. Everything just seemed slightly too absurd to be real. I placed the box gently on the living room table. It was light and about the size of a medium-sized box, I guess. I eyed it suspiciously, contemplating all the possible bizarre things that could fit inside it. A severed head? Sure, but there'd be some blood or something, right? Not if it was wrapped in plastic, though. A bomb? That would be too mundane, surely. Some sort of elaborate puzzle gizmo I'd spend days figuring out? That sounded more like it. I paced around the table restlessly. I knew I was bound to open it at some point, so there really wasn't anything to wait around for. I gently unwrapped it and opened the lid with utmost care. I studied the content with what I imagined was a puzzled expression on my face. There was just a picture, nothing else. I flipped the box over and shook it a few times, but to no avail. That was it. Surely an envelope would have been enough. I looked at the picture. It was a fairly recent picture of my wife and the kids, where my wife was standing behind them with her hands placed on their shoulders. Obviously professional work. But what did it mean? Was it a threat or a gift? I sat back down on the couch, examining the picture from all angles. There had to be something special about it. There just had to be some deeper meaning. Nothing else made any sense to me at that point. I wasn't going insane, I just knew it. But wouldn't that be exactly what an insane person would say? Eventually my mind just overloaded and I must have fallen asleep. I woke up in darkness. I must have slept through the day. I got up from the couch, yawning, slouching over to the kitchen to get some water. That's when it hit me. Why didn't my wife or kids wake up me when they got home? I gargled the water thoughtfully. I walked over to the nearest window and peered through the curtains. No car in the driveway. I remembered the picture then. Had it been a threat all along? Were they in some kind of danger? Without thinking, I bolted up the stairs and threw open the door to Erin's bedroom. Empty. Priscilla's bedroom. Empty. Our bedroom. Empty. I felt my heart racing and my mind kept wandering back to the eerie mailman and his smile. That knowing, creepy grin. And what was that he said? The lies has become the truth, has become the lies? Was that some sort of veiled threat? Did he abduct my family? Or know who did? Were they even in danger? I sat down on the bed, unable to string together comprehensible thoughts. I felt a detachment from reality that I had never considered possible, like a feeling of utter confusion and hopelessness combined. Like I didn't exist, or the world around me didn't exist, or both. With nothing tangible to go on except for a mailman who more than likely wasn't a mailman, and a picture by some anonymous photographer, I knew I was in no way mentally capable of solving this mess. But wait, there was something that had slipped my mind. Lisa Guerin. I hurried downstairs and uncovered the paycheck crumpled up into the cracks of the couch. I brought it over to the kitchen counter and studied it thoroughly. There was no phone number on it, but there was an address. I looked it up quickly on my phone. It was apparently registered to some sort of legal firm downtown, Vernon and Love. There was only one phone number listed on their info, so without delay I punched it in and hit dial. I didn't actually expect anyone to pick up. It was the middle of the night after all, and even if I by some miracle got a hold of anyone, I hadn't the slightest clue what I would ask them. I was therefore quite caught off guard when a soft female voice suddenly answered. "You have reached Vernon and Love. This is Gladys speaking. How may I be of assistance? My voice failed me. I tried putting together words that made any amount of sense, but failed miserably. I considered just hanging up, but instead I remained on the line, breathing heavily. Jesse? The woman whispered hoarsely. Is that you? I felt a cold chill run up my spine, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. My name wasn't Jesse, yet it felt so familiar, like it somehow was a part of me, or had been a part of me. No, I finally said, I am not Jesse. I am looking for Lisa Guerin. Total silence. I couldn't even hear if the woman on the other end was still breathing. Hello, are you still there? I am sorry, she said, her voice now shaking. There is currently no one here by that name. The peculiar phrasing made me curious. Currently? Okay, but did you at some point? I started. I am sorry, I just can't help you. Goodbye. She hung up. I tried calling again and again and again, but no answer. I slammed my head on the kitchen counter repeatedly and let out what can only be described as hysterical screams. I was losing it. I threw my phone into the wall, bits and pieces flying about like expensive confetti. I sighed deeply. There was nothing else, nothing I could think of. I thought about driving down to Vernon and Love, knocking their door or something, but to what end? I didn't even know if they had anything to do with anything. I started gathering the pieces of what had once been a phone, slowly letting everything that had happened sink in. I was searching around the living room for the missing battery when I noticed it. There up on a shelf, a framed picture exactly like the one I found in the box, except for one rather important detail. I was in it. I dropped the remains of my phone on the floor and grabbed the frame. Fumbling to get the picture out, I resorted to smashing the frame into the shelf instead, glass now sprinkling around me. I quickly recovered the picture I got from the box and laid them both out on the kitchen counter. They were identical. Well, apart from me missing from one, they were. Marie and the kids had the exact same facial expressions on both, and the position of her hands were also the same. Either I had been photoshopped into the one, or photoshopped out of the other. To be honest, I didn't know which I preferred. I had no recollection of the picture ever being taken, but then again my memory was rather flimsy these days. I sat down, trying desperately to shake something loose, any memory at all, but there was nothing, literally nothing. How on earth did it take me so long to notice? The brain is a curious thing, you see. It will hide away all the bad shit if it means it's protecting you somehow. Like if there's some trauma it just don't want you to revisit, or some dark secret it doesn't want you to know. The funny thing is, you won't always realize you've forgotten. You'll just gather the pieces of what you have and fill in the blanks with whatever makes sense to you personally, and you will be none the wiser. Until your patchwork story starts falling apart. The more I thought about what was missing, the more I realized I could be misremembering just about anything. I had no real grasp on reality. What had happened to me? What kind of accident had caused this? According to my doctors, no one seemed to know. They just found me unconscious on the ground, my neck broken. They assumed I had fallen off the scaffolding of the build site I was overseeing. But since there were no witnesses, and I couldn't remember a damn thing, it remained a mystery. And who exactly were my employers? This question was haunting me. I'd never considered it before now, but I really couldn't seem to remember what my company's name was, or who my boss was. Did I have a boss? All I recalled was that it had something to do with construction. I'd spend a lot of time on construction sites and in airports. Overseeing, that's the word the doctors used. It was nearing dawn, and the darkness was slowly retreating as I headed to the front door. I was contemplating going to the police, but I had no idea what to tell them. My wife, the actor, and my kids, the actors, had gone missing. Then I had to explain that maybe they weren't actors, and that I recently suffered a head-neck injury that could mean I was just imagining it all. I'm no police officer, but I would promptly show myself the door if it was my call. No, I had just one tangible clue: Vernon and Love. They definitely seemed dodgy on the phone, and I couldn't shake that strange feeling that came over me when that woman Gladys called me Jesse. I had no car, so I had no choice but to walk downtown. It would take me about an hour, but at least I'd get the chance to clear my head. The walk was largely uneventful, but I did realize that I had never walked downtown before. Isn't that strange? I bought the house 11 years ago, when Marie was pregnant with Aaron, or was she? But I couldn't for the life of me recall ever walking anywhere. What a wasted life, I depressingly pondered, as I finally stood before an anonymous, neglected brick building where the offices of Vernon and Love were supposed to be located. The front door was barely on its hinges, and an eerie, scraping noise echoed through empty hallways when I pushed it open. There were no signs of life anywhere, let alone any semblance of a thriving law practice. I wandered the bleak hallways of the first floor for 10 minutes, peering through every open door, finding nothing but long abandoned, decaying offices. I was about to climb the rather off-putting stairs when I heard the distinct sound of the elevator in motion. I had ignored the elevator because of the state this place was in. It didn't even occur to me that it might still be operational. Not quite knowing what to expect, I hid inside the office opposite to the elevator, nervously hugging the wall. What was my plan exactly? Jump out and scare them? I had no idea, but my mind kept insisting we stay put, so my body confusedly obliged. I could hear a loud ding as the elevator doors opened with a screeching noise, and then the rustling sound of feet pacing down the hall. A woman, I guessed, and stuck my head out the door to confirm. But whoever it was had turned the corner and was nowhere to be seen. I quickly darted into the elevator just before the doors closed. Staring at the panel, I had no idea which floor to choose, so I just pressed one blindly. I had the strangest feeling of déjà vu, like I had been in this elevator doing the exact same thing. But before I was allowed to explore the sensation, the elevator stopped and the doors dinged open. I got out carefully and crept down another empty hallway, littered with decaying offices. But something felt different. I had a strong sense I'd been here before, in the white room. The image of the room blinked in and out of my mind, and my body was now doing its own thing. Muscle memory, I guess they call it. It was like I was just a passenger along for the ride, as my feet carried me down endless hallways, turning left and right seemingly at random. After about 5 minutes of this, I spotted the door at the end of the hallway. It stood out like a gaping wound in its surroundings, the unwholesome red presence in stark contrast to the crumbling off-white walls. I dreaded what awaited me on the other side, but I couldn't help it. I had virtually no control at this point. With a swift movement, my hand reached the handle, and I yanked the door open. The white room. It was blindingly white, like the walls were reflecting light back on themselves. I suspect it was just a very white coat of paint, but it felt so unreal there and then as I was standing in the doorway taking it all in. In the middle of the room, 3 rather ordinary office chairs were placed, only one of which was occupied. "You!" I halfway shouted at the creepily smiling man facing me. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel. Angry, confused, furious. All I knew was that it didn't really surprise me. So whatever emotion was desperately trying to overcome me did so to no avail. Instead, I just kept staring at him and his unnecessarily unpleasant grin and sat down in the chair opposite. "You came around," he said. "I knew you would eventually." "I have no idea what you're on about," I said through gritted teeth. "But you better have some answers." The old man threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a jolly old laugh, more like the kind you'd expect coming from the hidden cells of an insane asylum. The sound startled me, I'll admit it, and I spent a few seconds gathering my composure. Eventually, the echoing madness resided, and we sat again in silence. "You're still not fully here, then," the creepy old man whispered. "Such a shame." What did he mean? Not here? I examined the man with what was starting to feel like murderous intent. He was old, that much was clear, completely bald, short, thin. But there was something really off-putting about his general presence that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He stood up from the chair, his fine blue suit now noticeably several sizes too large. His long red tie flapped wildly about his neck for a few moments as he turned to face the wall. "We need you here," he said, presumably to me and not the wall. "You have something we desire." "We?" I asked. "Who are we?" The man turned to face me again, his ominous grin widening as his gaze wandered to the ceiling. "Why, the company, of course," he said. "We are all so grateful for all the hard work you've done for us. all the grueling hours, days, weeks, months, and years. But it would have all been for nothing if you don't come back from your last mission. I buried my head in my hands. It didn't make any sense. This didn't sound like something a construction overseer would have to deal with at all. What in God's name had I gotten myself involved in? And why couldn't I remember any of it? It had to be the accident, that much seemed obvious. But was it even an accident then? Or something far more sinister? I snapped back to reality by the sound of the door opening. "Ah," the old man said. "You are here. Maybe she can help you come back to us." I turned to the door, expecting to see Lisa Guerin, or whatever her real name was. I was actually looking forward to speaking with her. Maybe she could tell me why the name Jessie felt so eerily familiar. "Marie," I gasped. "What are you doing here?" "Jessie?" the woman asked, her face strangely familiar, but definitely not my Marie, or Lisa, or whatever her name was. I stared at her confusedly. Why did I instinctively call her Marie then? It was like a part of me knew her, and a part of me didn't recognize her at all. It was all very disorienting, and I resorted to burying my head in my hands yet again. "I think he is coming back," the old man said. "He is starting to remember." My mind filled up with images, each one uncannily intimate to me, but none of which I could immediately remember. Some were horrible, filled with screams, blood, and death, while others were boring and mundane. I felt them all clawing away at my manifested self, as if trying to break down a mental wall. A throbbing pain spread all the way from my forehead to the back of my neck, and I was unable to form any comprehensible thoughts. "A part of you knows her as Gladys," the old man whispered into my ear, "another as Marie." I opened my eyes. Some of it was coming back to me. Not all, and not in the correct order, but I definitely remembered her. She was my Marie after all. I remembered her face, her scent, her body, movement, laughter, ambitions, and inner thoughts. It was like I suddenly learned all about her in an instant. The intensity of this feeling overwhelmed me, leaving me a sobbing, broken mess. "Yes," the old man triumphed. "You can see now, can't you?" Gladys, Marie, cradled me in her arms, hushing me gently as a tsunami of emotions and memories washed over me. The barriers of my mind now cracking as reality seeped in through the ever-collapsing patchwork of my delusions. I was both of them, and none of them. But still I couldn't become them. I feared I was too far gone, now trapped between the two, never to become whole again. "Lisa," I whispered hoarsely. "That's her name, isn't it?" The old man bent down to face the trembling, nervous wreck I currently inhabited. "Yes," he said. "That is the name of your fake wife." "And Aaron, Priscilla," I continued. "All fake," the old man quickly responded. "Actors, counterfeits, forgeries, shams, a facade." I can't tell you if this admission just served to devastate me further, or if it brought me some semblance of peace, because I was pretty out of it at this point. I was honestly just trying my best to not collapse as my mind was overflowing with information. "But how?" I murmured, my trembling voice barely audible. "How could I have—" "Now there's the million-dollar question." The old man laughed. "How indeed?" He was pacing around me now, small, dwarfish steps, the creepy grin still ever present on his wrinkled face. "You know, they called you the king," he said darkly, "the killer king. You were the best at what you do. Still are, I suppose. It will come back to you." I sat up slowly, Marie still cradling me in her arms, my eyes following the old man as he kept pacing around. "Uncountable bodies to your name," he continued, "all virtually traceless. A true craftsman." He stopped suddenly, just staring into the white wall, gently tapping the heel of his shoe on the floor. "Then what?" he started. "You grew a conscience? Unlikely as it may seem, it remains the only possible explanation, no?" He turned on a dime, now facing Marie and me. His smile had by now vanished, and I didn't particularly like the new expression any better. "Explanation to what?" I asked. This question seemed to amuse him, and he threw his head back and laughed maniacally. The madness of the laughter kept causing me some general discomfort. I still don't mind admitting. After a while, he regained his composure and just stood there, without blinking, staring directly into my eyes. "To why you tried to kill yourself," he said after some time. "To why you hung yourself." The words uttered pierced through my ears and into my brain like a needle. It was like they manifested physically and ripped through the last remnants of sanity I had left, leaving myself naked and vulnerable, a single strike now enough to completely shut me down. I knew in my heart it was true. I did it. I hung myself. But I failed. I failed at dying. Project Memphis was the last one, the man continued mercilessly, by now knowing I was brought to my knees, that he had me in the palm of his hand, the culmination of decades of meticulous planning, scheming, killing. His voice trailed off as he sat down on the chair again. All we needed was that last puzzle piece, he sighed deeply. But you hit it, didn't you? He wiped some sweat from his forehead, his breathing now noticeably strained. He didn't want to appear flustered, but I could clearly see that he was. I could tell by the rapid movement of his jugular that his heart was racing. How did I know this? How could I see this? Then you retreated into this ridiculous persona, he scoffed. The family man, the homeowner, the husband, the father, the suburban nobody. What a complete waste. Our actors, imposters, suffered a sudden change of heart when they had to take care of some deranged lunatic 24/7, and who could blame them? We paid them through the roof to stay, but you just wouldn't come back. So we had to, how do I put it, accelerate matters, and here we are. I could see 5 different ways I could kill him within seconds, many more to make him suffer. Then we, Marie and me, could run away, maybe even find a life worth living, somewhere far away from this madness. Pretend it was all a movie, something that happened to other people. It would be so easy. But I didn't anticipate the loyalty my newfound old love had for the company. I suddenly felt the cold steel resting on my neck and saw my own reflection in the razor-sharp blade. "Marie," I said, startled. "Why?" Her demeanor had changed. There was no love in her eyes anymore, no feelings, just stone-cold determination, and maybe just a little touch of psychopathy. "Just tell him, Jesse," she said, her voice now as cold as her eyes. "Tell him, and let's get back to the way things were." The old man laughed again. It seemed to be one of his many unwholesome character traits, laughing in awkward moments. I raised my hands above my head, indicating that I was no threat. "You two always made a great couple," he grinned. "Never a witness left alive." He stood up again, his heart rate now slowly stabilizing. He sighed deeply as he put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing weakly. "Just tell me where the girl is," he said, "and this can all be over." I still had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't really have any tangible memories of Jesse, just fragments, bits and pieces, fleeting notions of a past life, a person trapped somewhere deep in my psyche. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't deliver whatever it was they wanted. "What does she mean to you?" I asked. "Why is she so important?" The old man stared at me, his eyes widening, like the very question was somehow sacrilege. "She is everything," he whispered inauspiciously. "Grace is the key to everything." "How exactly?" I demanded, my eyes now scanning for every little detail I could use to escape. "How is she the key to everything?" "No one understands," he said, his voice now trembling. "No one ever will." His eyes kept wandering to the ceiling, and his heart rate was rising again. It was apparent that whoever this Grace was, the very idea of her was enough to unsettle the old man. "What's your name?" I asked bluntly, eyes locked on the ominous halfling. "What?" he responded, bewildered, his gaze now reverting back to face me. "I just want to know the name of the person I'm about to kill," I said. Oh, if I had any artistic talent whatsoever, I would still spend a lifetime trying to capture the look on his face. It was a thing of pure beauty, that creepy grin instantly altering into an expression of blood-curdling fear. My right elbow connected with Marie's chin with some force, her once pretty face now in need of several stitches and a decent dentist. With a continuous move, I grabbed the hideous red tie flapping about the old man's neck, pulling his creepy face right into the floor with all my might. There was an elegant, fountainous explosion of the crimson variety as my left hand, now wielding Marie's razor-sharp blade, cut into his jugular vein. I watched with some amount of joy as the pool of blood expanded, almost covering the entirety of the white floor. "Aesthetically perfect," Jesse explained. Then I put my boot to the back of the old man's head repeatedly, observing with some interest how the brain looks when mashed into a pulp. "Poor Marie," I said. "We could have made it. We really could." I let Jessie snap her neck since I was unsure about the general motoric of the move. It was a fairly pleasurable audio experience, but I could sense that the lack of blood troubled old Jessie. She deserved a quick death, I thought. We did in fact once love her. I stumbled to the door, the blood frenzy still passing significant amounts of dopamine to my brain. The way I saw it, I had two possible paths to follow, and I had to choose. We had to choose. Either we go through with Jesse's original plan and off ourselves, keeping the identity and location of Grace a secret forever. I figured the quickest way was to just jump off the roof if we were to follow this route. Or we could disappear. Live life, maybe. We'd always have to look over our shoulders, but at least we'd have some semblance of a normal existence, if only for a brief moment. These are my final words. I hope they make it to you, and that you can somehow find a suitable media to publish them. People deserve to know what can happen to anyone at any given moment. Don't trust anyone or anything, not even yourself. Doubt is self-perseverance. And just to be clear, I have left the building.